Secession is in the news. Catalonia is requesting independence from Spain. So I thought it would be a good time to discuss the theory and principles behind the right to secede. First, the facts. Catalonia is a province of Spain. They have their own culture and they have about 8 million people, and they have their own language, and they've been part of Spain, but they wanted to go their separate ways, so they had a referendum on independence from Spain, and they voted overwhelmingly to go ahead and secede. Spain refused and is threatening military force. So this is an important question which I thought would be a good time to discuss, because it's an actual case, it's not just theory, and many people can be harmed and hurt as a result of the wrong decision. The general principle for secession is that if millions of people overwhelmingly vote a majority decision to request independence or secede from the state from which they were part of, that their right should be respected and they should go their separate ways peacefully. The whole point here is not to try to impose your view. So the principle that is being applied when you confront this issue properly is the principle of consent of the governed. So you may have noticed that in many of my interviews I ask politicians, is all legitimate governmental power derived from the people? And invariably they say yes. And that's because in our Constitution it says, we the people, and this is one of the premises of our nation, that consent of the governed is what gives moral authority to a government. Now this can be contrasted with Mao Zedong's view, which was power, legitimate power comes from the barrel of a gun. Or King George's view when we requested independence from England, which was he had the right to impose his will because of the theory of the divine right of kings. So God gave him that right so he could impose his judgment and view on the colonies, and they just had to accept it because that was moral, because it came from God. So those are two other theories which obviously, in my view, are mistaken, and ours is the proper one. Consent of the governed is what gives moral authority to a government. So how we face this kind of issue can have really important and grave consequences. Let's examine two recent, well, one recent and one not so recent example. Czechoslovakia, which was a country, I don't know, some decades ago, I think it was in the 60s or 70s, was formed basically based on two different countries, the Czechs and the Slovaks, and they formed Czechoslovakia. At one point, the Slovaks said, look, we don't want to be part of this union. We want to go our separate way. The Czechs said to the Slovaks, that's a big mistake, you shouldn't do that. We're much better off in one country. But the Slovaks were not persuaded. So the key point here is, what did the Czechs do then? They said, okay, we disagree. We think that you're better off staying in the Union, but if you insist, good luck. What was the result of that good decision by the Czechoslovakia government at the time? Well, everything worked out fine. Peaceful relations, they get along fine. There's no tension between the Czechs and the Slovaks. Everything is great. Compare that to the decision that Abraham Lincoln had to make, and which led to the Civil War, which was when the various states of our union in the southern states, wanted to secede, he decided to impose by force their remaining in the Union, therefore creating a civil war. Now, the Civil War is probably the most devastating event that ever happened to America in terms of the number of people that died and the amount of property that was lost and the rights that were violated. So, in my own view, that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that a president ever made because of the dire consequences. And I also think that the southern states would have liberated the slaves anyway, as did all the other nations in Western civilization and Western Europe and America, etc. So we went and had the Civil War for nothing, and it cost us a tremendous amount because we didn't respect the principle of consent of the governed. So I thought I'd bring that as a good example of what happens when you violate the principle as compared to what the Czechs did when they followed the right principle. And I thought that this issue was good to clarify the fundamentals of political theory in your thinking. Let me know what you think, and who do you think is right?